Kia ora, good evening. Welcome to one more session of our user group, Coding Night New Zealand. And my name is Marcel Medina. Welcome. And tonight we're going to explore famous library that's been used for years. It's called AutoMapper. Not sure if you're aware, but this library's been well. I think like the past 7 years, I've been using this tool, and which helps us like a lot when translating objects. We're going to explore like in details tonight, and I reckon like for what the tool provides in the applications, it's a really handy library that I think all of us as developers working like with the .NET platform should be aware of. And I would like just to start with like some screens. If you're part of like of the user group, you already know me, but like if you're joining for the first time, I just like to show like the purpose of this meeting. Let me just share like my screen. I have my presentation ready. All right, let me just start with that. So for you, like if you don't know me, my name is Marcel Medina. I'm a software developer and Azure specialist. I'm also a playground enthusiast and coder. I'm a co-founder of playgokids.com. Currently, I'm working as a lead developer in my food bag. And my technical blog is tech.playgokids.com. And the purpose of our user group, we are a community of developers that we love coding and following the best practices in software development languages and technologies. Our user group is mainly focused on the Microsoft stack, and that's why we're approaching this library tonight using the .NET uh, platform for that. And the intent of the user group is to enable developers with practical knowledge to excel and launch their careers. So, independent on where you are in your current journey as a developer, if you are a junior, intermediate, senior, or lead developer, I think you're going to find like good information on this user group. And tonight, this is our agenda. We're going to explore the library, right? The purpose of the solution, uh, some sort of mapping on how you can get going with the library, techniques for flattening objects. Gonna show like a case of how things work and when you have multiple objects, complex objects, and you want to flatten into a simple object. And demo on wheels. So we're gonna have like lots of demos as usual. And starting, when you look at the library, right, AutoMapper is a library created by Jimmy Bogger, and it was created like to offer this object-to-object mapping. Right? When it says like by transforming an input object of a type onto an output of a different type. So when you have let's say in your solution you have two two modules. One it's used internally, and the other one you expose externally. And you don't want to expose that sort of model, internal model, to the external side. So you can use like AutoMapper to do that sort of translation. And with that, you would expose fewer properties. Or, or you can use like in both ways, both directions, from internal to external or external to be absorbed internally within the application. So we have like this mapping. If you look in here, it's pretty like straightforward, but you can see that on a particular class, on a input object, in an output, what the tool, it's a tool, it's a library that allows you to do that sort of mapping. We have like here properties being mapped, right? That that's the simplest scenario that shows how we can use the library. This is the website available so that you can check later and try like new experiments. Continue on the library itself. On this example, we're going to explore two packages, uh, mainly because we're using a web API as an example. If it wasn't a web API, only by using the AutoMapper in here would be enough if you're leveraging a console. Right? And if you're not taking dependency injection, I'm using dependency injection. So that's why I have this second library available. And that's the example. I think I'm gonna bring that up. So you can see here that in our example, we're going to hook the through like dependency injection using an extension that the library provides called add AutoMapper. And what it does, it hooks to the service collection that we have here represented by builder.services. And I'm specifying that, okay, whatever it's available on this assembly hooks up to add AutoMapper. Right? That's the first step. Then the second step would be, okay, here's a generic implementation. But what this hook is going to do is going to look at profiles. This is one of the abstract classes available in AutoMapper. So in this particular implementation, I'm exposing user information, a model that we have internal model into external model, represented by the user in a user view model. So you can see that I have highlighted that I'm doing like a simple mapping from user, that's the source, and destination to a user view model. And then in here I have like a more, um, I would say complex, but we are using different methods of mapping where I'm specifying that for a particular member that I'm specifying that's a destination, I'm gonna have something else. It's not available on this screenshot, but when I'm demoing the code, you're gonna see that I'm grabbing from a source in here. So destination, source. And there will be like some other actions available in here that we're specifying methods to ignore, do like the mapping, and also that it's a pretty good library that allows you to extend and implement some sort of behaviors with this method after map that allows us that after the mapping happens, I want to stamp some sort of value. In my case in here, as soon as it goes to the destination, I want to stamp the date. And I can do a reverse map. The reverse map means that by default, this is the source and the destination. By doing the reverse map, it automatically reverse the mapping. So this becomes the source and this becomes the destination. So it's very handy. So you basically can have just one way of mapping and telling the library that you want a reverse mapping. So you don't need to specify twice. And we're going to have like one more example here that using a more complex mapping. But like the mapping itself, it's straightforward. But when we're looking at these objects, you're going to see that's a complex object composed by not only a single class, but like multiple classes. You're going to have a flattening happening to this view model. And our trigger is going to happen through a web API but we're basically using dependency injection. So we're going to have in here our IMapper, which is the interface definition for AutoMapper. And you can see here that on this get users method, I'm getting a list of users, and I'm translating from a users list to a list of user view models. Right? So it has like also support for lists as well, not only a single um, object. I could have like a mapping of multiple objects defined in a list. Let me go back to where I was. And this, I have also provided the link where like to my blog, because I have put like this in details onto the website. And in here as well, we have the mapping, a simple mapping, right? And with the simple mapping, you can see that's the source, destination. In the previous screen, I didn't specify any sort of direct mapping of those properties. But in here you can see by having the same sort of display or definition of properties, AutoMapper does the translation automatically. So without specifying, uh, strictly specifying on code, the mapping. That's the URL for more details on how that's specified and defined. We have action mappings, which is our example where I mentioned that we can have methods to specify how the mapping is executed. And here, if you look, we have like first name, but the mapping is not straightforward. We have F name. So for this particular mapping, I need to say, look, for this destination here, use the first name. Same for last name, which is in here is L name. So I need to specify. Email, I don't need to specify. That's going to be because it's the same sort of label that gets translated automatically. But in here we have like a description field that doesn't do much. But I can specifically say to ignore it, right? So it doesn't try to do any sort of mapping. And in here, nothing else is going to happen. Right? I'm not specifying address in here, like because there's nothing here. But I have this date created. That's where by using the after map action, I can stamp the date in here. Right? So I put like that's a flow where we have from user, the source, and the destination user name view model. And because I'm using the reverse map, so in here I'm just reversing that. My view model becomes the source and the user becomes the destination. So it's kind of going backwards. Same thing here. That's where like we can use those action mappings. We also have flattening. And when we look at flattening, here I mentioned that we had, so let's say here, like we have the first name, like a user address that contains an address class, which is this one below. But you can see how that's defined. We have first name, last name, email, actual ID, address. You have this property that returns first name concatenated with last name without specifying any sort of actions. AutoMapper does the flattening automatically. So what it does, right? First, we're looking here at email. Email, that's going to be a straightforward. I think the library itself handles that as usual, right? But When it comes down to I'm specifying here that the destination has full name. The library is gonna try to find any sort of getters that contains that. Of first the properties and then the getters. And here there is a getter that says get full name. And the tool is going to pick this property and stamp against the full name. And here, if you look at, we have like a string of address country. It's just a string. The way of how the tool is going to do it, like the mapping, is going to look at the mapping that we have the user address. It's going to find, okay, this is address, but this is an object. It's another reference. It's going to go down to the address and it's going to look for the what specifies like that matches the country. So that was specified on purpose to be address country. And the tool does that without any actions, which is very handy for with flattening. Right, there is another article specific for AutoMapper for flattening. Well, bonus I'm gonna leave for now, but like what I would like to show is that we have this well, the solution that I put made it available, which is this one. And if you look in here like the solution, right? So we can see that we have well, a controller, we have the models, we have view models. We're just translating those two like models onto view models just to make things easier to understand. And we have the mapping, right? That's the user profile, and this is the console that we're gonna run. So if I was first, right? So we have the NuGet package. So by showing here, you can see that we have the AutoMapper and the extensions that use dependency injection. On this one, if I look in here, well, that was the first step. Second step, so we're connecting the hook. So we use .NET 6 with minimal APIs, but you can see here that I'm specifying, okay, whatever it's available in the program that contains this assembly hooks up to the service collection, iService collection. And this is the user profile. Here I have, well, just a definition, but maybe if I bring that one, maybe larger on the screen so you can see it. All right, so that was like our simple mapping from user to user view model, but the complex one was around the action mappings. So we have for member, and what I'm saying here is that for the destination that where we have this field f name, do the map from first name. Same I do for L name, do the mapping from last name. For the description, well, don't bother, just ignore. And after the mapping happens on the destination, just stamp the date. And for that, reverse the mapping from user to username view model to username view model to user. That's what I'm saying here. Same I mentioned for the flattening, right? And if I am to bring this one back, I can go to the controller. So you can see that we have different implementations, right? Where I'm doing a straight mapping from user to user view model using a list. Uh, I have also, I have not mentioned, but we have as part of those, I would say it's more like an actual mapping, but it's more like an extension. where we can use projections to do more intelligent or fluent queries in doing like the mapping directly on Lambda. Right, so with .NET we can use link and Lambda queries. This one is Lambda. So that's a very smooth way of, okay, from what's coming from users, just stamp and create a user view model. I'm going to show this one as well. We have the mapping in the reverse mapping with usernames. I just commented that out if I wasn't to use a reverse, but in here I'm going to show like the reverse. Feel free to uncomment that and test yourself when you have like some time. But by looking here as well, we also, this is the complex mapping. That looks like the same, right? Like so we're always doing like the mapping of an input to an output. And this is my, you can see we have get user list, get user address list. It all comes in here, right? User list. We have here like some dummy users from a movie that I particular enjoy watching, and we have also a user address list that contains a more complex object mapping with address, right? So it's basically similar, but with addition of like a more complex mapping. If I am to play that, just I put like breakpoints in here. So I'm gonna start playing the solution, and then as soon as I hit the endpoint, we're gonna see the transformation happening. So let's see, things are starting. I came up to my other window. Let me bring this one here. I'm going to extend that. Oops, yeah. All right, so I have like more my four method implementations. This is the simplest one where, so I just have hit the list. You can see here that on my list of users, I have all of the details, my address, this one is just a string, an email, first name, ID, and last name. When I'm translating to a user view model, well, that's the sort of minimal information. My internals as ID. In this case, I'm not exposing an address, but it's only that that's coming back. So if I just continue for that, you can see what's being returned. If I go with the extension, right, that's also, let me execute. So we're gonna see here that's the same, right, and same sort of list. But what it does in here is that, okay, for iQueryable queries, I have the ability to introduce projections. Because I have these objects, this could be done like with um, entity framework, for example. Right? So if you have a database implementation with using the entity framework and your object is being returned, you could, well, by default, you would have that as a queryable, like depending on how things are being implemented. But here I'm specifying that I'm dictating this object is as queryable, so I can use this projection. And by doing this projection, I'm just saying, okay, I need to have this configuration provider. And you remember, I think I mentioned about the injection, the dependency injection. So AutoMapper is going to be injected in here because the projection requires the configuration provider. In the end, I want to have a list of that. So it's going to do the mapping. And when I look in here, like it's the same sort of mapping, but in more fluent implementation. Right? This is very handy when you have entity framework. That's not going to be any different from the previous one. Right? Same sort of information. If I go with the usernames, right? So in this one, I'm doing the reverse. It's an interesting case because, well, I have like a list of users in here. I'm translating into a list of username view models. So from here, where I had like multiple, well, I had like all of the properties available, then that was stripped onto like a very specific one where I'm doing the mapping of F name, L name, email, description was set to ignore. I had my after mapping specified. So when that comes back in here, it's going to be translated back to user. Some properties are not going to be available, right? Because in here is that my whole full object that's supposed to be created. But what's not in there, address, it's not in there, right? So that's why it's nullable, it's null. And ID as well was a mapped because on this mapping here, it wasn't there. So with that, I'm just returning, but you can see that I did first conversion and then a translation, and then I translated again, the reverse. So that allows me to do that more fluently by using the action mapping, right? And in here is the more complex, that's the flattening. So if I do that, well, it looks very straightforward. There are no complexities at all in the mapping. And the tool in the library does the job really well. So it grabs the country, right? So you can see that, well, doing the sort of mapping directly could be painful, annoying. There are cases, well, because we're using a library to do that sort of translation, so we're introducing some sort of milliseconds of translation. There are people like it's I think like depending on your solution, like line of business solutions. Well, things like there's simple mappings like that. I think yeah, the library is a good way of eliminating like any sort of that sort of translation noise, right? Where you don't need to map individual properties directly. That sometimes it, well, in one line with the AutoMapper, it just saves you from implementing like a whole object with multiple lines. But because it's an extra library, there are like an additional extra milliseconds. So we need to consider that. And if I come back to let me go back to the presentation. So that was part one. If you have been across on the user group in the previous sessions, we always have like some extras as part of the demos. And initially we use a CQRS example where we had implementation using, well, we use Mediator with CQRS. That was our first session of the user group. And then in the other session, we talked about the Fluent validation library. And we extended, like after the implementing the Fluent validation, we also explored on the same example on how we could do it. Right? What I'm introducing here, like on the previous, even like this example with SecureS, now we're going to introduce AutoMapper. In the original implementation, we had that sort of mapping. I mentioned that one could be noise because, yeah, like we have here we have we have like products. We're dealing with products when we're creating products, right? So we have like add or update command. But with that, we have how many properties? One, two, three, four, five. We're doing a manual mapping. If you're not using AutoMapper, that's how you would be doing it. I'm going to solve like this mapping, well, fewer lines, I would say, by introducing the library. And we're gonna do this on code. Let me go back and show like this solution. Uh, come on, this one, right? So that was the previous solution. Not sure if you're familiar or not, but this one was also a web API. So we have like a product controller. We implement CQRS, command query responsibility segregation using mediator. So if you're not across, have a look at the uh, previous implementations. I think this one, um, I'm just going to continue. If more details, highly recommend you to have a look. What I would like to show is that, oh, let's go with the product controller. So we have the create and update methods on our controllers. But you can see here both are calling this command. As I jump in there, so we can see that we have our commands in here. I have some breakpoints because what we're gonna do this mapping, right? And from like what we were doing, first, I think first step, we need to include the NuGet packages, right? Uh, if I was to go in here, the program CS, you can see that I have implemented a custom module, right? So if I dive to that, this module is available in my library project. So when I look in here, you can see that I have mediator, we have like transient implementations with the mediator pipelines. So have a look at the previous videos. What we need to do here is to add the AutoMapper. And the thing is that we're dealing with this library here. What we can do, we can just come and add the AutoMapper by doing the NuGet package mapping, right? So I have like those uh, packages in here. I'm gonna look for AutoMapper. So I have that. I'm gonna install it. Okay, that's going to be introduced. Should be done. That was added. I'm gonna add as well the dependency injection in here. Let's do it. Was prompted. Let's continue with that. So now that's green. So it means that was hooked up. You can verify, you can see that this is red because things were modified. By double clicking, you can see that the dependencies of like on the packages were mapped. So second thing, right? So now we can come in here, inject, right? Or define the hook for the implementation. I have like some code in here. I'm just gonna copy because I don't want to make mistakes and just to save time as well. So I had like this one mapped, right? So you can see this is the product module and I'm injecting, okay, this is my service collection. From this, whatever is available based on, well, looking at this class I have implemented, take the assembly and add an AutoMapper to it. This, well, we have the hook, but now we need to create the profile. So let's create the profile. I'm going to create a new one, well, within the product, and add some class. Let's just wait for that. I'm gonna call it product profile. Let's add this one. So that what Visual Studio created. I have the code already available. I'm gonna just put in here, and we're gonna add the references. All right. In general, like I remove all of this noise with like using that we don't need. So what I'm doing here is that from my source product request that comes from externally, it does the map to the destination product DTO. I'm just using DTOs in here, but that's what's the external source destination. After I'm doing the mapping, which I'm not specifying the direct mapping because the properties are going to have similar names, right? I can dive to that. Request, we have name, SKU, quantity, and price. And if I go in here, right? So in here, I have ID, name, but we have SKU, quantity, price, date created, date modified, right? So we have like a mapping, a straight mapping of the object. So that's why I don't have any specifics. I'm just saying that, okay, take like stamp the date modified, what comes now, like the current date, date time. With that, we can jump, let me save that. We can go like to the command. And in here is the mapping that we have. So when the product comes in, if that's the first thing what I'm doing, I'm just retrieving the object. If it's in there, okay, is there like an existing product? If it if it is an existing product, well, grab like the index. I'm just having like in memory products in here, but grab like the index, and then from the index, just give me the product. Right? I want to remove all of the noise, but what I can do in here, I have the mapping. Yeah, that's gonna save us time. So like with those lines in here, I'm gonna replace with that. Another thing, right? So I need to have the mapping of the injection available for me. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to inject that in here. So let me put it AutoMapper, AutoMapper. Cool. Let me just apply that. So I have like injected AutoMapper onto my handler, and that's available now. What's an interesting thing in here is that on my mapping, so I'm just okay, what I'm receiving from the request, stamp, and modify my product DTO. Right? Only what's the change, right? Just the delta. Other properties are not going to be modified at all. If I was to do like a mapping of this onto a product DTO without considering what's coming, I would have no values or empty values. If it's string or integers, I would have like 0. But I'm here, I'm saying, okay, reuse what's available. And then I'm just, okay, take that one. And I have the date stamped as date modified, right? So that's done automatically. The other thing is that, okay, so if I'm not updating, then I'm adding. I can change that as well. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines, right? What I'm gonna do is that I'm going to transform that into fewer lines. Let's put like that. So for that mapping, what's coming, because it's a new object in here, I'm just taking the request. So it's a request converts into a product DTO. That's a new product. Because it's a new product, I need to have the date created stamped. On the mapping on product profile, I didn't do the mapping for the date created. Right? So I'm just take okay, whatever it's date modified that was stamped, just copy and set like the date created as well, and then we add the product. Right? I'm just seeing like the chat in here. Let's see. Let me see here. I'm gonna bring that one. So we have like Minju saying that it would be worthwhile mentioning that using AutoMapper might not be ideal if you have lots of complex custom configurations consisted of ignore and map from. Exactly. Yeah. That it should be used like for simple mappings. Right? If you have that sort of complex mapping, yeah, depends, right? If you're doing like flattening, if you can do flattening and you know where the touching points, that's good. But otherwise, if you have just complex types, that could be overwhelming. Yeah, I think we you definitely introduce more complexity by adopting another library, and that's if you're not, well, I would say confident, but if you're feeling that's going to introduce more noise in how you manage your models, then yeah, do it uh, manually and don't use the library. Thanks, Minju, for bringing that up. And with in here, I think we can play the solution now, and we can do like those two uh, validations for creation and update. So let's just wait for this to come up, and then we can check it work. It just came up in my other window. Let me bring this one. So we have that. Oh, sorry about the name. I just want like to make it like this. Well, it's just like we're extending on top of previous. So I want to continue with the name like secure as mediator with fluent validation and AutoMapper sample. I don't know what comes next, but I think I'm gonna use like more acronyms for that. But yeah, just to simplify the naming convention here. And so, well, I'm just gonna do like a post in here of a product, right? Because we're considering creation and updates from products. This one, I'm gonna create like a new product. I'm gonna put it, check the previous videos, but I was hungry here and I was considering breakfast. So I put like Marmite, and I'm gonna put it like, I don't know how much is it? I think I'm gonna put like maybe $4 for 1 unit. And because I'm creating, let's put it, I'm gonna, it's reaching my controller. And in here, it's gonna trigger, mediator is gonna trigger my command. Let's just dive into that. Right, that's a new product. So you will not find my product memory in here. So it skipped completely. But the mapping is coming with that information, right? Marmite, a SKU, a quantity, and a price. So it's gonna do the mapping. So I have a new product, right? And I'm just specifying, okay, whatever is the date modify, stamp for the date created. That's it, same dates, and it's gonna add, right? I'm just returning a true and nothing else. So it did what was supposed to do it. And if I do like an update on my memory list, I had milk. I can just put in here, right? Well, I think one milk, let's say like $4 as well. And let's just execute this one. So it came up now onto the updates controller. but that's going to call the same command. This time around we're going to have the object, right? The object was found. We can see here that we have a quantity of 10 with price 10, just random thing. But we have the name SKU, right? And the dates created and modified. So just pay attention for that, 8:45. And if I go in here, I'm gonna grab the index and then, okay, grab my products in here. And from that, I'm gonna say what's coming. It's coming with price of $4 and quantity of 1. Does the translation for me. All right, so I still have the ID, but I have the price and quantity updated. Date modified was stamped, so we have like 8:46, so you can see that it didn't change the date created. With that, so like I don't have any persistence, it's just in memory, but that was assigned back to the application, right? With like 200. I think like with that, we definitely achieved the purpose of the meeting. I don't know if you have any other questions. I don't think so. I just looking here, and I think it feels like we had like good coverage of what we could do. It. One of the things is that this is the link of the repository. Before doing that, let me just commit this because I definitely want you to have the latest and greatest. I have like multiple samples in here, but let me just commit this one. I'm gonna stage. I'm gonna say uh, AutoMapper and add it. And I'm gonna commit this. I'm gonna push that and looking. So that's going to be available soon. But if I look at the repository, I'm gonna put like on the chat as well. So it gets recorded for you. Let me just come down to that. And then you can see. So I have put the article in the source. So if you go like on the article, you're gonna have access to the source in there as well. I just wanted like to show this because then you guys can just take it from here and continue, right? Your nights and doing some coding. I appreciate like you guys that could join tonight. And if you're checking this video later on, also please have a look in the previous sessions as well if you have not checked. Well, with that, I just wish you like a good session, like next session like of coding, where we're gonna have uh, really well. Next session we're gonna have a library, or more like a CLI that helps us to do cloud native applications. Right, so that one is aligned with the Cloud Foundation. It's a very clever way of implementing solutions, and I think it's a trending thing that's going to help the markets. And if you get to check like the next session, I think like you're definitely going to be very excited for what's coming next. And with that, just like to say a good night, and I catch you guys later in the next session. Cool. Just see you later.